Cinema Bureau of Investigation, CBI for short. They investigate the C-Files, a mysterious collection of untouched film reviews that were lost for years. Until now. From terrifying encounters with dangerous poltergeists to heart-pounding chases with the galaxy's deadliest aliens, they will uncover their truth. Their mission is to investigate the supernatural and unexplained secrets of the C-Files. Now, here are your hosts, Special Agents Spooky Clutter and Carter Sauce. The arrogance of man is thinking that nature is in our control, and not the other way around. Let them fight. Hello there, fellow investigators, and welcome back to the C-Files March of the Monsters. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
And I'm Special Agent T-Con.
And on our road to Godzilla Vs Kong, we are covering the first movie in the MonsterVerse franchise, that being Godzilla 2014. And going into this, we have to understand that this movie is very important for many reasons. One reason being that this is the start of a new Godzilla universe that wasn't made in Japan. As you guys know, there was a Godzilla film made in America back in 1998, starring Matthew Broderick, and directed by the guy who did Independence Day. Now, that film, let's just say it didn't perform well at the box office or with Godzilla fans. So this is America's second attempt at a Godzilla franchise, and for what it is, as a good starter film going forward, I have to say it is a well-done film. We do have our issues with it, which we will get into, but overall, I'd say that this film did a decent job of reintroducing Godzilla to the American audience.
Indeed it has. And I have to say, you ever heard the phrase, if you don't succeed, try again? Well, they tried, and they knocked it right out of the park with this movie. This movie came out 1 year after, let's just say that it was somewhat of a good year for me and my friends here at the C-Files, at the C-Files podcast, because, short story, my senior year of high school was wrapping up, and I just finished doing a graduation ceremony, etiquette. That's the word I was looking for. Once that was done, I went over to this little hole-in-the-wall Italian shop that was literally right across the street, and Spooky Clutter called me and he said, "Hey, want to go see the new Godzilla movie?" I'm like, "Oh, hell yeah." And so they came over, they drove in, they picked me up, and we went straight to the movies right after graduation etiquette.
Yeah, and that's so cool because Carter had not gone out with Spooky Clutter and T-Con to see a movie of this magnitude with the monsters. And so Carter is thrown right into a massive plot regarding Godzilla. And to be honest with you, the plot is amazing. So it was really good to hook up with Carter Sauce HD, and Spooky Clutter as we went on our first journey into a bigger world.
I couldn't say it any better myself. So let's go and get into this film, shall we? Essentially, what's going on here is this is a reboot of the Godzilla franchise, although this is for America, not from Japan. Although Toho, the production company that did the original Godzilla films, did have their eye on this film, because let's be honest here. When you have a foreign franchise that you're trying to introduce to American audiences to make more popular and to bring that American audience over to your side of the fence, having this movie as an introduction into that world is very important. So, needless to say, there was a lot riding on the shoulders of this film to make sure that it delivered a good delivery of Godzilla, a good dose of Godzilla, if you will, to American audiences. Now, granted, Godzilla films aren't exactly a stranger to America. It just took a while for Godzilla to reach this side of the pond, so to speak. So, this film is essentially rebooting everything. It has no connection to the 98 film. This is a clean slate. And the first thing we get of this film is a shot of the Philippines, Well, besides that, the opening credits. Let's talk quickly about the opening credits. The opening credits are fantastic. You have a lot of black and white video. You have pictures of science books showing fish. You see a skeleton of the Godzilla creature. You have this really good soundtrack. And it's all building up to a very big moment where at the end of the opening credits, you see Godzilla rising out from the water and a nuke goes off. And that's a really good introduction into Godzilla. Then we get into the Philippines where the plot starts to unravel. We start seeing these spores. There's a dig site going on. And it turns out that these spores are the Mutos, which are the villains of the film. They're these bug-like creatures, and they are the antagonists of the film. And just a quick side note, I'm glad that they introduced some new creatures instead of just reusing old ones at first. Granted, I wanted to see more classic monsters, and we do. As we get later on into these films, we are seeing some more classic monsters, but it's a good thing that they try to do their own thing first, so they're not just milking off of the original franchise for marquee value, besides Godzilla, of course. So the Mutos are decent. They're kind of generic, but they serve their purpose well.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely. We also see, capitalizing on what you talked about the spores. So basically, they find these two giant spores. One is, sleeping. One's hatched, along with the trail leading to the sea, which is pretty. I like the cinematic view of that. Also, we start to see that early on in this film, especially prior to that, when Dr. Serizawa and I think it was Vivian Graham, if I'm correct, that they're in the cavern there that was unearthed when, like you said earlier, there about what was happening in the uranium mine, and we really get introduced to the gravity of how big the creatures are that we're dealing with, and I just so struck in awe with the brevity of what they're showing us without showing the creatures. And so basically what's going on here, we're in Japan. The Janjiro nuclear power plant is experiencing unusual seismic activity as the supervisor, Joe Brody, who is played by Bryan Cranston, he sends his wife, Sandra, to lead a team of technicians into the reactor. And there's been all these, what would be apparent like earthquakes, right? But they're not. I mean, they're tremors, but they're not earthquakes, okay? And so what eventually happens is that the reactor is breached. It's forcing Joe to close the reactor door, sadly, before his wife could get out. And that was really a pivotal moment to me in the beginning of the film, is that him and his wife are pretty much doing the same thing. That's their career. And we get this, really, if you think back to like 2011 in Japan, we get this imagery, if you will, of a meltdown. But the meltdown wasn't a meltdown like the way you think about it. It was a meltdown that was created by the Muto. And it was just really a very sentimental moment to see Joe there begging for his wife to run to get out of there before the complete meltdown. And, of course, she doesn't make it out. And then we jump forward 15 years, and we'll talk about that as we go along.
Run, Forrest, run! I'm just kidding. So, basically, the character, Bryan Cranston's character, this movie came out 1 year later after the series finale of Breaking Bad. So this is a post Breaking Bad Bryan Cranston. So for all you cultured people out there who knows who he is. And there was a moment like when we saw the nuclear power plant like imploding or being destroyed due to the Muto. I was getting a Chernobyl vibe from that though because of how sad it was.
Yeah, I have to agree. The setup for the Janjira plant being destroyed was very pivotal. And getting into character development just a little bit. And one of the issues I have with this film is that Bryan Cranston's character, Joe Brody, had a fantastic setup. He had a fantastic character arc. And one of the important things about character motivation and having a good character that the audience can sympathize with is that you give them something to work towards, a goal. And nothing gives a greater goal than having a loved one be killed in a situation that you had a hand in. This is all getting into character depth and the character's personal struggles with everything that's happened. And what upsets me about this film is that they killed off Joe Brody. And what a waste of Bryan Cranston. Bryan Cranston is a great actor. I've only seen clips of Breaking Bad, but based on what I saw in the beginning act of this film, he was fantastic. So my question is, why would they swap him out for Aaron Taylor Johnson? And no offense to him, I think that he did okay for his role, but it's obvious that Bryan Cranston's character was much more developed. I would have much rather have seen him as the main lead because he already had so much character growth just in that beginning scene in the Janjira plant and having to see his wife essentially die right in front of him. That's a really good character motivation, character building, and for them to just kill him off towards the end of the first act was kind of a big mistake. And one of the big criticisms that I agree with is that the beginning act of this film and the ending are really good, but it's that middle portion that really just grinds to a halt. And that's not just because of the lack of a strong character to guide through the film. It's the lack of monster action, which we will get into later.
Yeah, so what's going on there is, we jump 15 years forward. And so we see Joe and Sandra's son, Ford, who, he's a U.S. Navy EOD guy, which is explosive ordnance. And he returns home from a tour of duty with his wife and his son to San Francisco, but, must immediately depart from Japan after Joe's detained for trespassing and Jinjiro's quarantine zone. So automatically we see his son go from a little boy to older in the military, and he's thrown into this middle part of the movie, the start of the middle part of the movie, and it's a bumpy road throughout the middle part of the movie, dealing with the actor that's playing his son. And so there are some good parts in there, but I just see like that his son is sort of like a wuss. He's looking at his dad as like this conspiracy theorist when his dad is a very educated scientist along with their mother. And I don't even recall the son mentioning the mother. I don't know, maybe you guys can recall that. But the reality is that his father's trying to get back to the so-called contaminated zone so they can retrieve, so his father can retrieve the data, okay? But they realize that when they get there to the facility where the plant is in ruins, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a term called chrysalis, okay? And so the chrysalis is like a how would you say it? It's something that's been feeding off of the plant's reactor for all these years, and it's been basically emitting a strong electromagnetic pulse over time. And then this is where we get into the mutos and see how that comes about. But throughout that moment early on there with the interaction with his son, it just seems like Bryan Cranston is like reduced to like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, essentially that's what he was, because a lot of times the typical, or I should say the stereotypical conspiracy theorist outlook is a crazy, kooky guy who lives by himself and has nothing better to do than to look into government conspiracies and whatnot. But the difference is this guy was a scientist, and technically still is. He still does his research. He has a lot of like notes in his apartment in Japan, and they really do paint him out to be like that stereotypical conspiracy theorist. But this is a man who knows his science and he knows what's going on, and his theory was right, because it turns out that it wasn't just a random act of God, if you will, that the plant was destroyed. It was because there was a creature there, that being the Muto, and he knew it, at least to a certain degree. He didn't know the specifics, but he knew it wasn't just a natural disaster. And again, I have to praise Bryan Cranston for his acting here, because when they're detained, him and his son, and they're actually at the plant, and Bryan Cranston is being questioned, you can just feel his emotion when he says, my wife died here. something killed my wife and I have a right to know what it was. Just the power in his voice and his acting. That's why I really wish they didn't kill him off. And again, it goes back to that very important character development. And this is all building up. That's one of the beautiful things about this film that I like, is it knows how to build up to those big moments. The big reveal of the Muto. Now that it's matured, it's come out of its chrysalis, and it's wrecking havoc. And it turns out it has an EMP attack, and that's something pretty unique. I don't know. I'm not familiar with any other Godzilla monsters that have had a EMP attack, but that's a first for me, at least to my knowledge. So that's pretty cool.
Okay, great. That's fine, and we're going to get into that. But we got to hammer this home. And I know Carter Sauce, you're going to jump in here, brother. But look, Bryan Cranston didn't even get a chance to see the brevity of the monsters, and he is a central key character. And I know we're going to spend some time on this because it's so important. We've been bouncing back and forth from the beginning to the entry to the middle part, and that's cool. But we got to get this out of the way before we move on. They took a Class A, actor and just dumped him into the dustbin of, the recycle bin on your desktop computer. It just made me really upset what they did with Bryan Cranston. But I'll let Carter Sauce, speak on that, and we can go on.
Yeah, Bryan Cranston, or Joe in this movie, some people thought he was like the stereotypical like conspiracy theorist, tinfoil over his head, cell phone and a paper in a potato chip bag, shit like that. But he wasn't crazy though, not because he was a scientist, and he was hitting. Some people thought he was full of shit though, but he was actually hitting nails on the head though. Like he was hitting, because he was spot on though, because he was, and the characters, like he was basically like he was like Matt Hooper from Jaws, like the part when he's examining Christy Watkins' remains, saying this was not a boat accident, it wasn't a propeller, or it wasn't Jack the Ripper, it was a shark. So basically, there was a moment like that where he was channeling his Matt Hooper, and Ford's son, and Ford, the character, he's basically the John Connor of this movie though, because he thinks that his dad is just crazy until he gets a reality check and he sees that, oh my God, you're really real. Shit like that.
Hey, look, I got to interject this real quick because, and then, Spooky Clutter, you can get in on this. But come on, man. His dad's got, floppy disks. It's okay, man. They're 4 or 5 megabytes. But don't beat the guy down because he's old technology. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he is old school, but, the important thing is that he had a good idea of what was going on, and his character potential was just wasted when the Muto attacks. And I can see what they were trying to do, trying to make the son as the main focus and to give him motivation, but it just really didn't go anywhere. So the Muto escapes, and now the mission is to track down this Muto. And of course, you're probably wondering, where the hell is Godzilla in all this? And that's a good point, because they eventually get to a good buildup of Godzilla when the Muto gets tracked down to Hawaii. And the whole Hawaii shot, like the entire Hawaii arc, you could say, was actually one of my favorite moments, just because getting that buildup to Godzilla, on screen and having the music swell up, I love that. It's awesome. And it reminded me a lot of the Jurassic Park scene where the T-Rex pops out for the first time. That's what I got a vibe of. And the funny thing is, there's actually a few moments in this film that harkens back to Jurassic Park, which I love. It was really cool.
Yes, Jurassic Park. The part when I like to reference, like I was getting references of Jurassic Park in there, especially the Monarch chopper flying over a jungle area, and then the 2 soldiers hanging on the bridge, laying still, not moving, shut your radio off, turn your lights up, be still, don't move, stuff like that though. Like there's a lot of references in there, and there's a lot of foreshadowing in there, because if you remember that earlier in the movie, Ford, he had like a poster of 2 monsters fighting it out though, and I think he had like a pet butterfly or something that said Mothra on it, and there was a dragon Easter egg in there.
Yeah, the dragon scene that comes later, it was It was when they were in Chinatown. It kind of reminded me of King Ghidorah. So I thought that was cool. And one thing I want to mention before I want to start talking about the Godzilla creature itself is a reference to the original, a reference or a nod, you could say. So, as you guys most likely well know, we have Dr. Serizawa in this film. Now, this obviously isn't the same Serizawa because this is a whole other universe, but I love the fact that they got Dr. Serizawa in this film because, Godzilla and Serizawa, it's like milk and cookies. It kind of all fits. So, and Dr. Serizawa is portrayed beautifully by Ken Watanabe, and I love this guy's acting. I've only seen him in one other film besides this, and that would be Batman Begins, where he played the doppelganger or the fake Ra's al Ghul. So that's a little fun trivia for you. And I love Ken. He's great. He did really good in this movie. He also did good in Godzilla King of the Monsters, which we will be reviewing on our road to Godzilla vs Kong. But I really like that they brought him in on this.
Yeah, you have Ken Watanabe. That's what you're referring to there. And there's a great movie to watch with him called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You will fully understand his abilities and his talents. And something interesting about his character in this movie, he is so encapsulated in his moment as Serizawa, and we are going back decades. And I really appreciate his connection that he had to the original Serizawa. We didn't have that love triangle moment going on there, but nevertheless, his seriousness as a scientist, and then he had his partner, Vivian Graham, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, and so I really like that departure from that love triangle. It wasn't necessary without delving too much into the original movie, which to me is a completely different standalone movie. Completely different standalone. The message being sent is completely different. That's why I'm so thankful, Spooky Clutter, that you introduced me to a better understanding of the original movie in such a manner that it is completely standalone for me now in the message, having seen it 2 or 3 times with you and with Carter Sauces over the years. So, nevertheless, I digress. Serizawa is spot on. I think that the dialogue between him and Joe Brody, played by Bryan Cranston, I really would have loved to have seen that, that connection, that acting abilities, skill, talents, and abilities to flourish even further into the film and should have gone on to the next film.
My thoughts exactly. And speaking of Serizawa, I like how they gave him somewhat of a little backstory to him, because in the original Godzilla, we just know that he was in a love triangle, and we didn't know what he did, though. Well, we knew that he was a scientist and decided to make this oxygen bomb and stuff like that. But in this movie, in this adaptation, we learned that his father actually was killed in Hiroshima when the Americans dropped the bomb on them. And he actually has this old pocket watch that belonged to his dad that stopped at 8:15 when Hiroshima and Nagasaki got bombed. And it was a nice idea of what they did, though, sort of like paying homage to like doing your research. I applaud them for doing their research. And from the beginning, when they were doing the 1954 bombing practices, when they were trying to kill Godzilla with these nukes, though, they were actually at a place called Bikini Atoll, where they actually did nuclear experiments, though. And not to mention that this was in the hype of the Cold War. Russia, the U.S., the Soviet Union, and the United States. We're actually at a draw. Basically, we have this staring match. Okay, go on, make your move, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's really cool that they had the Cold War stuff and referencing Bikini Island, which was real, and doing all the nuclear tests. And I am glad that they gave Dr. Serizawa a bit of a backstory. Not too much. It's much more subtle, if you will, and there's not a lot of focus. But they're trying to punch home to the audience that Dr. Serizawa is very passionate about Godzilla, and about the use of nuclear weapons, which, if you guys remember, that was one of the purposes of the original film, was about warning against the use of nuclear weapons. So that spirit of the original film is still there. It's just much more minimalized compared to the first film, but it is there.
It's ironic that you would mention that, because as you were speaking that, being that we're close to Fort Hood, Texas, and thinking about nuclear bombs, I'm hearing explosions that echo, miles and miles away from ground zero, if you will, no pun intended, right to our doorstep. And the explosions just make me think about what Gareth Edwards had cited regarding Godzilla. He went back to the 54 movie, and for him, it was an inspiration to him. And Edwards even stated that Godzilla was a metaphor for Hiroshima in the original movie, and that they tried to keep that. And there were a lot of themes from the 54 movie that they kept. And that's what Gareth Edwards was saying. And basically what he did, though, he decided on a sort of a restrained approach, similar to when films were basically fueled by a sense of anticipation and relied on high suspense. And he was referring to Alien, Jaws, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind as his influences. On why Edwards chose a restrained direction, he stated that I felt that in modern cinema, it's so easy to just throw everything at the screen constantly. And that was an interesting quote, So Edwards also wanted Godzilla to feel universal in a way that it could appeal to the general audience, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind did. And Edwards additionally stated that I grew up watching Spielberg movies. What they did so well as having epic, fantastic spectacles, they made characters feel real and human. And we see that in this movie. The actual image of Godzilla was so personal, especially in his anger, his rage, and his peace. And that speaks to what Gareth Edwards was attempting to get across to the audience as he spoke of previous movies from Spielberg. It was an epic, fantastic spectacle in my book, I have to tell you. And we'll get to that epic moment towards the end, but let's continue on.
Well, I like what Gareth Edwards was trying to do, humanizing Godzilla a little bit, because most of the films in the past made Godzilla more as like a mindless monster. In certain films, they gave Godzilla personality, and that was obviously to appeal to more audiences. But I am glad, regardless, that they gave Godzilla more human-esque features, having more emotions, more control in his face, his eyes. You can tell when he's upset, when he's calm. I like that. That's really good. That's a good improvement on the original design. And since we're on the topic of the design, I have to say, I really like this design of Godzilla. I think that they did a pretty good job. I will say that they improved that design in the sequel, King of the Monsters. But as a good refresher or reintroduction of the character for American audiences, especially in comparison to the 98 film, this Godzilla is much more faithful to the classic Toho designs. So I'm really glad that they did that.
My thoughts exactly. I think they tried to do their best to say that they were trying their best to stay original to the source, and they basically hit it out of left field. I like what they did. I love the new the new look of Godzilla compared to the other one where he's basically tall and he has like these basically foam looking spikes on his back, and he has these big like googly bulging eyes, which creeped me the hell out though. No offense though, but I like how like it was basically basically duking it out though. Basically they were basically causing trouble though. There was like a balance in there. Godzilla is to maintain the balance, while those two were just causing disbalance or discord. And speaking of discord, there's actually two characters, Ford and Ellie, the husband and wife in the story. Fun fact though, it wouldn't be until a year later that they would actually be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, which is kind of awkward though, because in one movie you are husband and wife, and the next movie you're brother and sister. Awkward. Anyway, and speaking of references, one of the towns in the movie is called, in real life, it's called Steveston Village in Richmond, British Columbia. And you're probably wondering, why does that town seem familiar, or why does it look familiar? Well, prepare to have your mind blown. It is actually used as Storybrooke in this show I used to watch called Once Upon a Time. And it was also used as Angel Grove in the 2017 Power Rangers reboot.
Yeah, I ditto that because I remember many TV shows that showed San Francisco skyline in California there, and it showed a city block, or actually a residential block, if you will. And that particular view had been thrown all over the place back in the 70s and 80s. Even in Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry movies, you see that also, because a lot of Clint Eastwood movies were made in San Francisco. So I digress from that. That's a good point there, Carter Sauce. I want to refer back to what you're talking about, the Mutos there. We got to give them kudos. Not only kudos for the creature development, the view of the creature, its actions, but also the sounds. We have to give, attention to the sounds of the creature, which I really liked. And I really like the Muto creature. I think it's a great antagonist for Godzilla. The, moments that we didn't get and the moments that we did get, because there were moments where we needed to see the fight with the Mutos, and we're watching it from a third-person view, if you will, which was pretty bizarre. Nevertheless, the moments that we had would bring that famous word crescendo again, where the Mutos are obliterated at one point, but I'll leave that for an ending moment. But yeah, great stuff. Great interaction with the Mutos, their sounds, and the actual character creation overall.
Yeah, that's one of the big issues with this film that I have personally, is that when we get to the big crescendo scene where the Muto is in the airport and then we get to see Godzilla's foot, and then they pan up and they show Godzilla, and then he does that first epic roar. That was a really awesome scene. But then it cuts away. It cuts to Ford Brody's son watching it on TV. And, I can respect what Gareth Edwards was trying to do when he was, trying to build up the suspense. But you have to remember that this is a Godzilla film. You're supposed to see the monster actions. And this is where we get into the criticism of the middle act of the film. It just slows to a grinding halt, and it's actually the more weaker point of the film, because now the entire focus is trying to get Ford Brody to San Francisco with the nuke to lure the Mutos and lure Godzilla. And I can see what they were trying to do, but it just went on way too long, and Ford Brody as a character really wasn't selling it for me personally, and that's why the middle half was kind of slow. Granted, there are some exciting parts in there. For example, when they're on the train tracks and the female Muto is like hiding on the mountain and she destroys the train, that stuff is really cool. But there's not too many scenes in there that I would say stood out to me the most in this middle act of the film.
Yes, I agree completely, and I might as well throw in there this M4 semi-automatic rifle moment. It is so overused, overabused, and it's almost, why? I mean, why are you shooting an M4 over and over again at something that's 400 feet tall and thinking you're going to get an effect? I mean, the Muto itself is pounding. Both of the Mutos are pounding Godzilla with who knows the force. I mean, the only connection I could make would be to like Rocky IV when, Drago is hitting this thing and the Russian premier says, whatever he hits, he destroys. I mean, the Muto is pounding Godzilla and just inflicting pain. And then you got these soldiers over here, which is this overused soldier stuff. That even goes back to Jurassic World Part 3. Or maybe I got the title wrong, but anyway, Part 3 Jurassic World. It's just, get away from this machine gun, or not even machine gun, semi-automatic. Yeah, maybe it's a machine gun, whatever. But you think you're going to penetrate the creature. I mean, come on, man. It's just absolute abuse.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is if you guys remember the original Godzilla films, the military always has to make a stand. That was in the original film, and that's a spirit that stayed with every other Godzilla film going forward. It's always this thing that, oh yeah, the military's got to rally up and attack the the giant monsters, even if it's completely, utterly useless. You still got to do it. You still got to have it. But I do agree that, you got an M4, you're trying to shoot at a monster that's over 300 feet tall. What exactly are you going to do? Hell, rockets aren't even damaging this thing. What is your M4 going to do?
Basically, that's not a semi-automatic. It's a military grade weapon. It's an M4A1, and there's full and there's semi-automatic on it. And you're probably wondering why are they using that if it's not going to work though. Well, these are basically stereotypical military movie guys or fictional military soldiers. Whenever you see a big monster, open fire. Brr, brr, brr. It's not going to basically do jack shit though. It's basically like trying to put out a forest fire with a water gun. I mean, it could do it does very, it doesn't do jack shit though. It's like you're not going to do your best though. And I have to know, yes, these are military guys and I know my weapons, so don't judge me, okay? I have my hobbies.
Right, and look, I got to throw this in here, man. There's two things I got to throw in real quick. The weaponry, Gareth Edwards actually cited action films from the 70s and early 80s that they were an influence for him with the film. That he even quoted saying, "We tried to make a blockbuster that harkens back to the pace and style of the early 80s and 70s action movies." And guess what? That happened. And then it even drifted over to this crossover moment where, Bryan Cranston's son's character, I forgot his name already, but he's sitting there, covered in mud. We get this Huey coming in. It's a Predator moment with Arnold Schwarzenegger, thrown in there, which would complement what Gareth Edwards was looking at, trying to throw in this 80s film action with Godzilla. And I think, I'm not going to call it an epic fail, guys, but it is sort of, out there in left field from a baseball perspective.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting reference. I didn't really mind it too much. I didn't realize that at first until you guys actually mentioned it, that it looks like it was straight out of Predator. And that's fine, If you are a fan of these films and you want to input those little Easter eggs into the film, I say go for it. We've already mentioned that there's a few scenes in here that remind us of Jurassic Park. And that's fine, because you're referencing really good films, and it's all in good fun. Now, what I really want to get into is the entire San Francisco scene, preferably when Godzilla arrives at the Golden Gate Bridge. I love that entire scene. Obviously, you have an evacuation going on. The military is trying to get the civilians out of there. And you have the bus that has Ford's son on. And the bus driver, I love the bus driver. I've seen that guy in a few other things, and I can't remember which movies or TV shows, but I've seen him before. And it was just a minor thing, but I just loved it because Godzilla has arrived in the San Francisco Bay Area. And you can hear his roar. And the bus driver wipes the window because it's raining out. So he wipes his window like in Jurassic Park. And I just love that reference. And when Godzilla is starting to rise up from the water, the military does a stupid thing. And the stupid thing is that they start firing at the damn bridge. Obviously, they're trying to attack Godzilla, but they're firing at the bridge. And I'm like, dude, what are you guys doing? You got civilians on here, not to mention you have your own people on. What are you doing?
It's hilarious, man. I mean, even on that bridge, man, it reminds me of, Planet of the Apes with Caesar and the gorillas and the orangutans. It's just so funny. I was laughing my ass off with it. But I got to tell you this. No matter what, throughout this movie, every time they showed Godzilla was in full effect, power, strength, and I don't know who's going to touch on the ending of what happened. I can digress, but I'm going to put my 2 cents in at some point. What I did not expect, and I saw this, I know I saw it in, XD, and I believe I saw it in IMAX, and when this shit happened at the ending, man, I was just like, yes! Yes! You throw your arms up, man. It's like, bingo!
Yeah, I had that moment as well. But let's be honest here. We were all waiting for it to happen. That was one of the things that was missing in the 98 film that they at least got right here. But let's save that for the end, because that would be a great point to finish on. So one of the things I enjoy about the San Francisco scene, besides Godzilla breaking through the damn bridge, which was utterly hilarious, by the way, Godzilla's at a point where he's getting shot to hell, and he's like, you know what, fuck this, I'm out, and just busts right through the Golden Gate Bridge, and he just lets off this awesome roar, and you have this really amazing cinematic shot of him in the distance with all the boats, and it's just a beautiful scene. It's fantastic. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about the San Francisco arc is when the soldiers go in to the city through a halo jump, and that once again build up of tension and suspense, and they have this creepy like song where people are like in a choir, if you will, and they're just flying through the clouds because there's a big storm, and you see a POV shot of one of the soldiers looking at Godzilla fighting the Muto, and I like that. I like that little scene. The only criticism I have is that we got a little bit too much of a POV shot from the human angle. I felt that we needed a little bit more like drawn back views, and they were there. Don't get me wrong. It's just I felt that we need to see the fights just a little bit better, because everything was really close quarters in a way, a little hard to see. And one of the other criticisms I have is that the film at the end here in the San Francisco arc, it was a little too dark. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it was hard to see some of the scenes going because everything was so dark. So that's one criticism that I have for me personally.
Yeah, there's one big scene that always confused me. So earlier, like, I was just confused for a minute though when I just forgot what this Halo jump, right. I liked the Halo jump. It was very badass though, but it was a shame that we saw like a few, like a bunch of like there was like the majority of it through the trailer. But I would have preferred if they didn't do that so much though. I like how they were building it up though, I understand, but it just like if you see it in the trailer and you see it in the movie, it's like, it's same old. I've seen better, stuff like that. And there's actually a lot of references in there, pop culture references in there. Oh yeah, remember when Brody was on the bridge with his military buddies delivering the bomb through the train, and the Muto was hiding, appeared out of the clouds. That was out of the mountains. That was like a reference to the first Alien. When the xenomorph stowed away on the lifeboat with Ellen. And another moment is when we see the female Muto swallow this nuclear warhead, and it's surrounded with eggs on it because she laid these eggs. And Brody goes back and he just like sets fire to these eggs. And that was a reference to aliens though. And then we see the female Muto. He sees her. She sees him, and she's basically pissed off though. It's like the Queen getting pissed off in Aliens though. Like, this bitch is really killing my offspring. Oh no, you didn't. And the nuclear scene when Brody gets lifted off, and we see this big flash of nuclear because the bomb went off into the bay. It sort of reminded me of the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, one of the movies. What was it, The Dark Knight or something? I forgot.
Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, Dark Knight Rises, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, continuing on with that, great references there, Carter Sauce. I agree. We got Dark Knight Rises. We got Aliens in full effect. We got, Predator. It's really, I like those moments. I think they're great. I really like the ending of it, and I'm going to digress for both you guys to first give the ending to this. Again, I have to get off of the Brody thing. I think Brody could have been done better in a much better way. Much better. The son of Bryan Cranston, of course. But I really like the ending. I mean, it's fucking fantastical. I mean, I don't remember what I did specifically at the theater, but I went ape shit at some point. It wasn't as bad as another moment I had at the. I'm sure Spooky Clutter can remember when I got up out of the seat of some fucking movie. I don't remember what it was. And I laughed my ass out of the theater or went
Oh
crazy.
yeah, no, I remember, and we'll get into that as our closing final thoughts. Well, actually, no, I'll just mention it here. So, the moment that he's referring to, we all went to go see the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and we were watching. We got to the ending, and the ending, for those who haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it here, but when you get to the ending, where essentially what happens is a can of whoop ass is literally popped open. And it was so utterly hilarious. Like, all of us were laughing. Although I have to say, I wasn't laughing as hard as T-Con was, but I can understand why he was laughing so hard, because it was just utterly insane. That's the best way to describe that ending scene for the movie. And for those who have seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That entire scene was just batshit insane, and it was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah,
So that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, in reality, at the end of that movie, I know we're digressing big time, but it's worth it because, the whole history regarding the Manson murders and all that shit, had it in reality ended like that in real life, it would have been the most epic fucking moment in in reality history. And so, just do your homework on the Manson murders. Go watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and you'll get the picture. Let's move on.
Right, so since we're coming to the end here, let's talk about the big scene. So here we go. Ford Brody, has just destroyed the Muto nest. The female Muto and the male Muto were just kicking Godzilla's ass. He was getting double teamed like there's no tomorrow, and suddenly the nest goes up in flames. And the female Muto is pissed. She is certifiably pissed. And then she sees Ford. And she's not happy. And basically Ford is screwed. Okay? He has nowhere to go. She's about to just wreck his day. And all of a sudden, you see a flash of blue light on Ford's face. He looks to his left, and you start to see the trail. You know what it is. It's Godzilla's atomic breath. Up until this point, we have not seen Godzilla use his atomic breath. And to be honest, I'm glad that they saved this for the end. I know that quite a few people didn't like that they wanted to see it earlier, but you need to have that crescendo moment, right? And he unleashes his atomic breath for the first time in all its blue glory, and it's fantastic. It is just kick-ass. And then, when we get to the end of the film, well, not the end per se, but when Ford is on the boat trying to take the nuke out of the bay, to a safe distance so it can explode without having any casualties, the female Muto has caught up with him, and she's about to get him again. And Ford gets saved once again by Godzilla. And what Godzilla does is he pulls a Kong move. So the Kong move is ripping the monster's mouth open, but this time Godzilla shoots atomic breath down her throat, and it's just insane, just utterly insane. It was so awesome, so much so that the head was essentially blown off, and then Godzilla lets off this triumphant roar as the power comes back on. Absolutely epic scene, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it's a completely disintegrating moment. And it was so done in such a manner, so epic. Actually, if you go back and you watch the remake of King Kong with Jack Black, when he took that T-Rex, that was a beautiful moment. I loved it. But this shit was off the charts.
Right. It was the coolest moment in history. Like, oh, you're not going anywhere. You thought you could double team me? Well, guess what? Payback's a bitch. And Godzilla wastes that motherfucker.
Right. And that's a very good note to end on. So as we wrap things up here, as a final question for the night, what's something that really stuck out to you guys about this film overall?
What stuck out of this movie is that they were trying something again. Like, okay, they were trying to fix their mistake, though. I like how this was based. I like how everybody said, they were going, how the director of this movie was going to take a movie that was originated in Japan, and they turned it into a smash hit, though. Compared to the last mistake, though, there was a thing called trial and error. So basically, this trial actually was successful, and I liked it though. And I'm just getting vibes from whenever when Power Rangers actually originated from Japan and they somehow came over and they did like a U.S. adaptation of it. That's going on today, and I like how like we are paying homage to the original source material and we're making it our version of it, like not better, but like equivalent to or equal to this as the source material.
Great. I agree with that big time. I'm going to add to that and say that this is the first movie in the legendary state, correct? Going forward, am I correct?
Yeah, it's the first film in the MonsterVerse franchise, you could call it.
Okay, and it's great because it's so important that you take the name Muto. Okay, this is the creature that is the first adversary in this particular genre with the legendary going forward. Legendary. What did you say?
The MonsterVerse.
Right, the legendary MonsterVerse. Now, when you take the word Muto, and I have been kind of bouncing around trying to figure out what that is, but when you reverse the word, it doesn't say atom necessarily, but it says atom. Like if you use the word O, and again, language is everything, okay? So if you reverse Muto, you get atom or atom. You know, and the atom is so important to what we're talking about in the nuclear age. And straight out of that, we get Godzilla. And so going forward, it's so important that Muto, the Muto creature, is a straight up, I'm telling you, it's an adversary for the ages. Going forward, we're going to see something much greater, much bigger. But I am grateful for the Muto in all its evil that it must be destroyed. It must be eliminated. It must be conquered.
That's very well said. And as a final thought for me, what I really enjoy about this film is it establishes that Godzilla is a force of nature as he always was. Godzilla has always been a force of nature, although in this case he's much more of an anti-hero, not really a straight-up villain, and he's not entirely the hero either because, you know, there's a lot of instances in this movie where innocent people were probably killed. For example, when he makes his first arrival into Hawaii, obviously because he's so massive, there's a tidal wave that is created as a result of him coming in. And a lot of people probably get drowned. And obviously that's sad, and Godzilla didn't intend for that to happen, but again, he's a force of nature. He's like a hurricane. You just stay out of its way, let it do its job. Godzilla is the balance, like Serizawa said, and that's also something that I like. I like the dynamic between Godzilla and Serizawa. I thought that's really important. And it kind of sets a standard going forward for these MonsterVerse films. And that's why I'm excited to get into Godzilla King of the Monsters and then eventually Godzilla vs. Kong, because this is really going to come to fruition. If anybody here has seen the trailer, they understand that, you know, Godzilla's acting a little bit different than he has in this film and in King of the Monsters. He's acting more like that anti-hero that most of us Godzilla fans have always known him to be. This force of nature that really doesn't care who gets in its way. You know, he's on a mission, and if you're in the line of fire, you're kind of toast. But they don't make him the straight-out villain, which is something I do enjoy, because I do like Godzilla being more of the hero-esque type or that anti-hero, and I'm glad that they kind of set that standard in this first film going forward. And that concludes our investigation of Godzilla 2014. I'm really excited to get into these next films. It's going to be one hell of a ride.
Well, I have to stay tuned also for this final moment. I would like to interject this moment because we have to understand that the translation of the Japanese word Gojira is actually a combination of two Japanese words. Gorira, which means gorilla, and Gojira, which means whale. Therefore, Kong and Godzilla together in the epic battle on March 31st, 2020.
And with that all being said, thank you guys very much for listening. And until next time, fellow investigators, remember,
The entertainment is out there.